This video goes along with your discussion post number 4. It's going to address thesis statements, and most specifically, the type of thesis statement that I teach, which is the what, how, why thesis statement. Now, many of you have probably learned what a thesis statement is in the past. It's a claim that you set out to argue or present in a paper or perhaps a speech. And it also includes reasons for that claim that support that claim. There are many different kinds of thesis statements. There will be some that will be more argumentative in your college career, and there will be some that are more presentation-like. So there certainly isn't one kind. I teach the what, how, why thesis statement because if you can write a what, how, why thesis statement for your writing task, then you've covered all the bases. You'll have the claim that you're arguing, you'll have the reasons that support that claim or the framework you're using to support or argue that claim, and you'll also include that really important why, which is why this even matters. If you can't figure out why your topic is important to your audience, then they may not be able to figure out why it's important. And if you, as adults, if we know something isn't important to us, we're probably going to choose not to read that document or complete that task, right? So it's really important that we're thinking about who our audience is when we're writing these thesis statements. And as we go through this activity, and then I show you a couple thesis statements geared towards your actual paper prompts, some sample thesis statements, I want you to be thinking about who do you want to write your paper to? Obviously, I will be reading your paper and providing you with an assessment of it, but you can really think about who you would gear this towards. I'll just share that I am working on my PhD in literacy education. So anything that I write for my doctoral program is geared towards other educators. That is always my target audience. I'm not writing to business people. I'm not writing to lawyers. I'm always writing for other educators. So it makes it a little bit easier because I am also my own target audience. So I can think about why a little bit more clearly, why my arguments are important. If I were going to write some of my papers for my students instead of for other educators, I would reframe my argument, reframe my why, right? Because students would find different value in some of the things I might be arguing. So just keep that in mind as we're working through this. Okay, so So I've got a fun little activity here. So imagine that you're alone on a deserted desert island. So nobody's there, and there's also like no vegetation growing, okay? So you're there for 1 year, and you can have unlimited amounts of water and one other food. Pick which food you think would be best for your health. Not what food you would like, but the healthiest food. So corn, alfalfa sprouts, these are those little teeny like bean sprouts you might see on sandwiches sometimes. They're like tiny little plants. Hot dogs, spinach, peaches, bananas, and milk chocolate. Not chocolate milk, but like actual like bars of chocolate. So think about that for 1 more minute and then cast your vote. Okay, so this was actually a study that Paul Rosen, a psychology professor at UPenn, asked a group of people. And you can see the majority of people chose bananas. Of course, bananas have a lot of sugar in them and potassium. 27% chose spinach. Spinach have protein and iron and calcium. Corn is mainly sugar. Alfalfa sprouts, those are pretty healthy for you. Peaches, probably vitamin C. Hot dogs, of course, you got protein and some salt. And then milk chocolate, you've got fat and sugar. Any one of those things might be helpful to keep you alive for a while. But actually the answer is hot dogs. Okay, so for those, I'll be interested to know how many people chose hot dogs. Every time I do this in class, My results are pretty close to Rosen's results. So very few people actually choose hot dogs, but hot dogs would be the best choice to keep you alive. So this is a conclusion that, well, whoever did the study on the food itself, overall hot dogs would provide all necessary nutrients, sufficient protein, and a more optimal amino acid balance, suggesting they would be best suited to help you survive for a year. Okay, so that's kind of what came out of this study. Okay, so what does a thesis statement do? Again, you've probably heard this in other classes. It might sound a little different across the disciplines, and that's okay. So take everything that I say and try to put it together with what you already know about thesis statements. So a thesis statement tells the reader how you will interpret the significance of the subject matter under discussion. So it just tells your reader basically what you're going to say, what you're going to argue, what your topic is, what your purpose is. It's also a roadmap for your reader. It tells your reader what to expect from the rest of your paper. So I always tell my students in 101 and 102 that your thesis statement is your roadmap. So if you're going to drive to my house and say, hey, Laura, let's go on a road trip. If you show up and you don't have any plans for where we're going to go, you're just like, hey, jump in and we'll go somewhere, I'm probably going to tell you no thanks, because I have no clue how long we're going to be gone. I have no clue what kind of clothes I need, if we're going to drive somewhere cold or drive somewhere hot or drive to the beach. I don't know, like, are there going to be places along the way so we can stop and use the restroom, or we can like eat a snack or something. It's just, I'm a little bit uncomfortable if I don't know where we're going. So the roadmap of your paper, your thesis statement, tells your reader, hey, here's what we're doing, and these are the stops we're going to make along the way. Okay, so it's really important that we lay those out. And we'll see in our paragraph, each of our paragraphs will relate back to our thesis so that your reader can literally follow your thesis as a roadmap. It can directly answer the question asked of you. So if you think back to your prompt, what is the question you're being asked? No matter which topic you chose, you have in that first paragraph one specific question. So if it's about discipline-specific courses, that question is, should NSC adopt these courses and why, right? So your thesis statement can literally just be the reverse of the question. You can turn it into a statement and then provide that because or that how, okay? And then importantly, it needs to make a claim that others might dispute. If everybody in the room agrees, then your argument probably isn't very important, right? Or you haven't reframed it in a way that makes it interesting. That doesn't mean we have to argue super controversial topics all the time, although of course that's valuable too. But let's say most people in the room agree that the writing test you have to take to get out of high school is really bogus, right? So why should we do this? Most of us agree, like, it's probably not that valuable. It probably didn't really demonstrate how smart you are or how talented you are at writing. But to just say, hey, we shouldn't have to take this test anymore, that's not really an interesting argument, right? Because we're all just going to like cheer and throw a pizza party and then not take the test. But if you can tell me why we shouldn't take this test, what is so fascinating about the reasons why, other than we just hate it, right? So maybe this involves doing some original research. Maybe this involves looking at it from a gender or race or class perspective. So how can you make this argument different or interesting, something that people could dispute? I could say that the test is bogus because it gives young men an advantage over young women based on the questions it asks. Somebody could dispute that, and somebody could say, you know what, it's really not about gender. It's a really a class issue. So students who come from upper class families might have an advantage based on the questions being asked. Someone could argue with that and say, you know what, it has nothing to do with race, class, or gender. It is just that it's too expensive, right? And they could break down the cost of administering this test and the results, how well prepared students really are, okay? So again, make sure that others might dispute it. So your thesis is usually a single sentence, or it's taught as a single sentence somewhere in your first paragraph that presents your argument to your reader. But I want to add in here that the thesis does not have to be one sentence. It's taught that way because readers want to know what you're going to do in a very concise way. But if you're ever struggling to make it one sentence, just throw that out the window. It's kind of like that old writing wisdom. Who cares? Have a 2-sentence thesis if you need to. I'll tell you, in some of my papers, now I'm generally writing papers that are in between like 15 to 30 pages. I don't have a 1-sentence thesis statement, because that would be really incredible if I could fit 30 pages of ideas into 1 sentence. I usually have an entire paragraph breaking down my thesis and then summarizing it more succinctly in about 2 to 3 sentences. Okay. Now, if you're writing a 5-page paper, you could probably get it done in 1 or 2 sentences. You probably don't need an entire paragraph to break it down, but just keep that in mind. It's not only about your audience, who you're writing to, but also your purpose and the complexity of your argument. Okay. All right, so it's made up of 3 parts. Again, this is the type of thesis statement that I teach, and I want you to practice this semester, but I want you to also stay flexible and realize that not every class or writing task is going to call for a what, how, why thesis. If you start thinking about your argument and your thesis statement in these 3 parts, you'll be better off, and you'll cover all the ground you need to, and you'll leave less to the reader to have to figure out. But just know that this isn't the end-all be-all. There are many ways to create a thesis statement, and some disciplines appreciate different thesis statements. So the what is that claim. It is the idea you are arguing. What is your main point? What do you want your reader to walk away with? Well, if we're thinking about discipline-specific English 102 courses, maybe your what is NSC needs to adopt these English 102 discipline-specific courses. That's your claim. You haven't given me any reasons why. You haven't told me why this is an important topic to begin with, but you've told me what you're going to be arguing. So the how is how you plan to argue that idea. So it could be what evidence you plan to provide. And when I say evidence, this is where I'm talking about that roadmap, right? Those stops along the way. So what paragraphs can we expect in the future? It could be for more complex subjects or papers. It could be that you're just going to provide me with a framework or a lens to look at this problem. So again, thinking back to the writing test you have to take when you exit high school. If I'm going to look at that from a race perspective, then I'm going to look at how maybe critical race theory plays in, or just the inequities that might make that test unfair. So again, I'm going to give my reader this plan for how I am going to support this what. And then the why, and this is something that's often left out, but it's so important. The why is why your reader should care about this topic. Why is it important, and important specifically to them? How can you put it in context that they're going to say, yep, I need to be on board with this because this is something very important. If you wrote me a paper about how a small New England community was losing one species of fish or crab or something, I would have a hard time really connecting with that, right? Because for me, it's like, well, so they'll just eat a different kind of crab or a different kind of fish. I don't know. But if you start linking what's going on in that community to what's going on in my community, or if you demonstrate how the loss of that one species is going to have an effect on species we have in the Pacific Ocean, right? Something that I might eat more often. I'm going to see, oh, okay, this is actually a really important topic. I can get on board with this. So remember those 3 parts. The claim is the what. The way that you plan to argue it, the framework you're going to use, or the lens, or those little pieces of evidence along the way, that's the how. And then that why is why your reader should care, why they should spend the time reading this. So lots of times students are really anxious and they just can't get the thesis statement written. They're too afraid to put that pen to paper. If you're having that problem, just start with these words. In this essay, I am trying to say that. I mean, go ahead and type it out or write it out by hand, whichever way you generally write your essays. You can always get rid of it later, okay? So in this essay, I'm trying to say that, and now I have a thesis statement about hot dogs keeping us alive on a desert island. Notice it's a pretty long thesis statement. It's not just 1 sentence. So in this essay, I'm trying to say that, along with plenty of fresh water, hot dogs would be the best choice of food to have on a deserted desert island, because hot dogs provide the necessary nutrients, sufficient protein, and optimal balance of amino acids for survival. Understanding that seemingly healthy foods do not always offer all necessary nutrients is important because we live in an age of fad diets, and diets such as the grapefruit diet may not be as healthy as we think. Okay, so what I've done there is I have my claim. My claim is that hot dogs would be the best choice of food to have on a desert island because they provide, or actually, sorry, my claim is just that hot dogs would be the best choice of food to have on a desert island for survival, basically, even though that's not written in there. That's my claim. That is the thing I want to demonstrate to you. Now, the way I'm going to demonstrate it is by providing you evidence for how they have necessary nutrients, providing evidence for the amount of protein they have versus other types of food, and providing evidence for how they have a balance of the optimal balance of amino acids for survival. I could have a paragraph or two on each one of these ideas. I could do comparative studies of the hot dog versus the leaf of spinach. I could bring in all kinds of evidence to show these three things. But if you think of this as a roadmap, we know, okay, here's our road trip. We're going to go find out how hot dogs are the best choice of food. And we're going to stop at this place, and we're going to stop at this place, and we're going to stop at this place. So as a reader, I know exactly where we're going. I feel very comfortable getting in this car. And then I have the really important why. So I could have just stopped there and somebody would have said, oh, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, but I'm probably not going to get washed up on a deserted island anytime soon. But this writer has shown me why this argument's important anyway, because we live in this society where we're told, hey, you can eat, all steak or all cheese, or you can eat all grapefruits and you'll be just fine because these foods are healthy, right? But really, this argument shows that it's not always the healthy food that is best for us, right? Or maybe it's that we don't need to be afraid of eating a little bit of fat, even though we've probably many of you have grown up in like the low fat diet era where, everything had to be fat free or low fat. So it helps us to look at food a little bit differently. Okay, and then of course we're going to take off that first sentence because we don't actually want that. If you think back to McKinney, Madalena, I need you to say I. That would not be a really useful I statement. In this essay, I'm going to argue that. We know she's going to argue that. We want to hear her voice in other places, like her analysis. Okay, so I'm just breaking it back down. There's your what. I tend to use a because as a connector between my what and my how. Of course, there are many different ways to do that. But for me, it's just an easy trick that I tend to go to all the time. Okay, so there's our what and our how, and of course, our very important why. Okay, so we're actually not going to do the thesis workshop. This is going to be your discussion post 4. Okay, so I'm gonna show you two thesis statements that I have written for our class. So this first one is topic number 2. So this is where I will pick apart an old writing wisdom. So here's my thesis I wrote. Although the 5-paragraph essay has been taught as the ultimate essay format in K through 12 writing, teachers should reconsider the way this format is taught due to the disconnect between elementary and secondary writing tasks and the various writing tasks students will face in college. Making this significant change in K through 12 education is important because providing more flexible and realistic ways of writing will help prepare more students for college, in turn giving them the support they need to be successful. So take a minute and think about where I have my claim, my what, where I have my how I plan to support this claim, and where I have my why, which is why this argument is even important. So just you can pause it or you can take the next 2 seconds to think about that. The way I wrote this is, here is my what. That's my claim. Teachers should reconsider the way the 5-paragraph format is taught. This is my how. So my how is that elementary and secondary writing tasks are disconnected from the writing tasks that students face in college. Okay, they're just not the same. And then this is my why. So if we make this significant change, we're going to prepare more students for college in a more meaningful way, which is going to help them be more successful. They'll see this connection between what they're doing in K through 12 writing and maybe even their personal writing and their college writing. Now, I have this little bit up here. Although the 5-paragraph essay has been taught as the ultimate essay format in K through 12 writing, this is actually a counterclaim that I'm going to end up talking about. Now, it's not part of my what, how, and why necessarily, at least not the way I broke it down, but it's something that I'm probably going to start with. I want to demonstrate how the 5-paragraph essay has been taught historically and how much focus and attention has been given to it, and maybe even some of the benefits of it. And I could have actually changed this from the way it's been taught to, although the 5-paragraph essay is beneficial. And maybe if my student peers were my audience, maybe I would have focused on the benefits versus the limitations. But here, because I'm a teacher, I want to focus on the way something is taught and the reasons why we might want to change the way something is taught. So hopefully you can see how audience plays a part in my actual thesis creation. Okay, I'm going to show you one more. Now this is going back real quick though, you can see this is actually, I have a period here. So this is actually a 2-sentence thesis, okay? If we move on to this next one, this thesis is for a sample essay prompt number 1 about discipline-specific courses. If you notice, this is only 1 sentence long. So here I did actually get that nice 1-sentence thesis, but there's no reason that I need to stress myself out over that, okay? It's more important that I get a clear and concise what, how, and why than I fit it all into 1 sentence. Many students might jump at the chance to take an English 102 course specific to their discipline. However, these students should consider the fact that discipline-specific courses may not prepare them for their careers as well as they may like, and these courses may actually ill-prepare them for their other generalist courses, which can lead to lower GPAs and fewer scholarship opportunities in the end. Okay, so again, take a minute to think about where my claim, my what is, how I plan to support that claim, what stops we're going to make along the way, and then where my really important why is. Okay, so the way I wrote this, and I may actually do this backwards. So my why is the fact that being ill-prepared can lead to lower GPAs and fewer scholarship opportunities in the end. My what is sort of unstated here. So my what is basically, it's tied into this fact that students should basically reconsider and not take these classes. So my what is kind of unstated. Discipline-specific English 102 classes do not prepare students for other classes and their career. Okay, so that's basically my what. Notice that wasn't even actually in my thesis. So I'm gonna highlight this just so I can kind of remember that. I'm gonna change it to red. Okay, so my how is really the fact that these courses may not prepare them well for their careers and that they may actually ill-prepare them for their other generalist courses. So again, I do have a what, I do have a main claim that's tied into this, but this is maybe a better way to write it or a more clear way to write it. I have my how, and I also have this really important why. Without this why, people may not care about this issue. But if I frame it in terms of lower GPAs and fewer scholarship opportunities, then it may catch students' attention. Now, again, let's think back to audience here, because teachers probably don't care as much about student GPAs or their scholarship opportunities, right? Who cares about that? Students care about that. If you think back to the way I frame this, many students might jump at the chance, but these students should reconsider. I'm definitely writing this paper for my fellow students, right? I'm not writing this for educators. Whereas the first prompt, I was writing the way that we teach these things, the way we should reconsider the way we teach these things. In the second one, I'm writing about students and the way they should react and whether they should support this or not. So hopefully walking through those two thesis statements along with the PowerPoint is going to give you some ideas for how you can create your own what, how, why thesis. And we're going to practice that a little bit this week. And then next week, in about a week and a half, you actually have a full draft due of your paper. So you were supposed to have collected all or most of the sources you needed by yesterday. And you're going to be working with those, quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing, and analyzing some of those quotes that you pulled from those sources. You're going to be working on that this week. So as you're doing that and thinking about how you can bring these sources together, you're going to need to start thinking about where do I see my thesis at this point? And this is what we call a working thesis. A working thesis means it's not done yet. It can change. And oftentimes thesis statements do change, but we need to start with something so that you can start writing that full draft and bringing in all your different pieces from your sources. So start thinking the way that I modeled these two. How could you, based on the sources you've collected or the way that you want to view the problem, how could you write that what, how, why thesis? One last thing about the why. Oftentimes, we don't think about including the why in our thesis. We actually incorporate it into our conclusion. And that's okay. If you don't talk about your why until your conclusion, that's okay. I like to include mine right off the bat so that my readers get on board with me. But if you ever write a what, how thesis, and then you're really confused and you're looking back through your whole paper and you're thinking, I don't have a why, go to your conclusion. Your conclusion is probably going to include it because that's our sort of last ditch effort to get our readers on board with us, okay? So please let me know if you have questions. I look forward to seeing some sample thesis statements.